on this February Wednesday. We're happy to be with you today. We're going to continue this series on Mother Teresa. In here, I just wanted to add a story about Mother Teresa today. So, this image that you see on the screen is an image of Mother Teresa in Lebanon during the siege of Beirut. And this is just a very phenomenal story about just the authority and the trust and the faith and the hope that this incredible woman had. So I'm going to recount it as best I can. So there was a house. So Beirut in Lebanon was being attacked by the country Israel, led by Ariel Sharon. And they had started to bomb the city as a way of moving the people out of Beirut. And in the course of their bombing, they bombed an orphanage for Muslim children with severe disabilities. And there were about 100 children there. And in the bombing, the staff left the orphanage. And some of the staff on their way out of the orphanage were killed or others wounded. But there was nobody there to care for these children as the bombing continued. And so a woman in the neighborhood sent a frantic call trying to find somebody who could come in and negotiate care for these children. And Mother Teresa answered the call. She entered Lebanon during the war, and she went to Beirut, and she met there with a priest and an ambassador, and she said, "We have to get the children out." And they said, "Mother, we can't get you into Beirut. We can't get you to the house where these children are. It's too dangerous. There are bombs everywhere. It's too dangerous." And Mother Teresa said, "No, I'm going. You have to get me there." And they said, "Mother Teresa, the only way that we can get you there, the only possible way, is if there's a ceasefire. Even one of our priests has died from the bombings." And Mother Teresa said, "Okay, there will be a ceasefire." And she met with ambassador to Lebanon from the United States, and he was a diplomat that was very well known for his skill. And she met with him, and she said to him, "There will be a ceasefire, and I will go in to get the children." And the ambassador said, "Mother, I respect you. I respect your care for these children. I believe in the power of prayer." And she said that she had asked Our Lady, Mother Teresa said that she had prayed to Our Lady and asked for a ceasefire the next day so that she could go in and rescue the children. And the ambassador said, "Well, I believe in the power of prayer. I believe in Our Lady's desire for a ceasefire, but you only gave her a day to work with, and she's having to work with these politicians, and these are difficult politicians." And Mother Teresa just looked at him and said, "There will be a ceasefire tomorrow. Have a convoy ready so that we can get the children out of Lebanon, out of Beirut, out of the area that was being bombed." So the ambassador went to meet with these politicians, and the next morning the city was silent. The bombing had stopped. A ceasefire had been issued. I'm going to close the door because there's a vacuum. And so the very next day, the bombing did stop. The ceasefire went through, and a convoy went. And Mother Teresa always, when she was dealing with the impoverished, she always said that any efforts for them had to be done one by one. And so one by one, these children were carried out of the bombed orphanage, put into a van, and brought to Mother Teresa's sisters in a safer part of Lebanon for them to care for them there. Now, this is one of the very interesting things about Mother Teresa. So they say that the children were a mixture of they all had severe impairments, whether physical or mental. And it was said that some of the children, while they were in Mother Teresa's arms, started to flourish and lost the impairment that they were holding on to. And what Mother Teresa said was that they were mimicking each other's behavior, and so that actually not all of the children had these disabilities, but some were mimicking it. And once in her arms and loved by her, they began to flourish. It was very interesting. I saw that about this particular transfer of the children from the orphanage in Lebanon to the convoy that was getting them out, because when we were in Peru a number of years ago, the priest there, Father Jack Davis, he had been serving in Chimbote when Mother Teresa came to start the house in Chimbote, Peru. And he had brought her to a home for women who, because of their physical disabilities, had been abandoned by their families. And so he had set up a home to care for them. And he said that there were these two sisters, and both of them had a sort of muscular dystrophy, and both of them hung their heads because of the tightness of their muscles and other things. And Mother Teresa went right up to one of the sisters and grabbed her by the head and said a prayer over her, and she held her head up straight. Then she went to the next sister and did the same, spent about 10 minutes praying for her. And the other sisters had stayed at the angle. When she backed away, she said this sister was mimicking the other, and the impairment had stopped. This is just a really beautiful thing about Mother Teresa. Each person needs to be loved personally and individually, each person. And that when loved for who they are, they flourish. And that those were physical manifestations of, right, the interior reality. So we might say, well, what about the children who still had their physical impairment, or who still had their physical disability? That wasn't keeping them from flourishing, right? They're still capable of flourishing in their own individual way. And this goes back to Mother Teresa's, I didn't come to convert everybody to Christianity, right? If you're born a Muslim, you're supposed to be the best Muslim you can. If you're born Hindi, you're supposed to be the best Hindi that you can be. And just this, whatever you were made to be, you live that to your fullest. So, just a beautiful story about her, and then we'll start with some more of her reflections on thirst. Mother Teresa to her sisters says, I have chosen you. Never be tired, sisters, of repeating that sentence. We have been chosen for a purpose, to quench the thirst of Jesus for souls. Mother Teresa again to her sisters says, it is very important for us to know that Jesus is thirsting for our love, for the love of the whole world. Ask yourself, have I heard Jesus directly say this word to me personally? I thirst. I want your love. If our hearts are pure, really surrendered to Him, this thing becomes part of our thirst to love Him better. This is on prayer. She says, if we only say prayers, then naturally you may not be praying. To pray means to be completely united to Jesus in such a way as allow Him to pray in us, with us, for us, through us. This cleaving to each other, Jesus and I, is prayer. We are all called to pray like this. I think that's, just a call to continue to go deeper in prayer. And that it's not about the words that we say, it's about the joining of ourselves to Jesus, which is just a beautiful challenge to pray with that cleaving to Jesus as she describes it. She says to her sisters, loving trust is only the fruit of total surrender. You cannot have trust unless you are one with a person. Total surrender and loving trust are twins. And the Bible verse that she uses for this is, even the hairs of your head are all numbered. And so that answering, like, how does Jesus love us? How does Jesus thirst for us? In a way that counts all of the hairs on our head. And I think if you're bald, you still have hair follicles. So Jesus counts those. But to want to know Christ the way that He knows us. My own Jesus, she says, do with me as you wish, as long as you wish, without a single glance at my feelings and pain. I am your own. I want to satiate your thirst with every single drop of blood that you can find in me. This is one of those prayers that one would have to pray very carefully and know that when some of these prayers are answered, they mean great challenge for us. Let's read that again. My own Jesus, do with me as you wish, as long as you wish, without a single glance at my feelings and pain. I am your own. I want to satiate your thirst with every single drop of blood that you can find in me. See the humility of God, Mother Teresa says. He made himself the hungry one to satisfy our hunger for God through our love. See the unity between prayer and wholehearted free service. We meet Jesus in the bread of life in the Eucharist and the humanity of Christ in the distressing disguise of the poor. We must be able to unite both of these. Prayer by itself, no. Work by itself, no. These two have to go together. I think that We talked about that a little bit yesterday about Mother Teresa's um, starting and ending the day in adoration, and how united she saw the adoration of the Eucharist with the love and care given uh, to Jesus, who was disguised in the distress of the poor on the streets. Um, One of the things that happened was some of the sisters went up to Mother Teresa and they said, Mother Teresa, we have so much work to do. We have so much work to do. We don't have time for prayer. Can we shorten our prayer time so that we can serve the poor more? And she said, no, it's when you're most busy serving God that you have the need all the more for more prayer time. And she increased the amount of time that the sisters were in prayer. Because these things, prayer and work, service of Christ and the poor, are not at odds with each other. They're necessary so that you can continue to recognize Jesus in prayer and Jesus in the poor. Do that one again. See the humility of God. He made himself the hungry one to satisfy our hunger for God through our love. See the unity between prayer and wholehearted free service. We meet Jesus in the bread of life in the Eucharist and the humanity of Christ in the distressing disguise of the poor. We must be able to unite both of these. Prayer by itself? No. Work by itself? No. These two have to go together. Mother Teresa, of course, we know from this story about her time in Beirut in Lebanon. She had special devotion to our Blessed Mother, and she would appeal to her in prayer and have a lot of her prayers answered. And so a few of these are her reflections on the Blessed Mother's example. She says, be only all for Jesus through Mary. This is the best way to satiate his thirst. It's important to remember that phrase, I thirst, who is that spoken to, right? The soldiers were there, but Mary, Jesus' mother, Mary Magdalene, and the beloved disciple were also there. And so, who did Jesus say, I thirst to? Well, to all of us through the whole world over. And in particular, historically, also to his mother. And so she says, so you see in what way you too can take your stand at the foot of the cross with Mary, our mother, and satiate the thirst of Jesus. Let us offer everything to Jesus, every sorrow, humiliation, discomfort. And a good Lenten practice, or in any time of suffering, to see ourselves standing at the foot of the cross with Mary. Again, she says, how much we need Mary to teach us what it means to satiate God's thirsting love for us, which Jesus came to reveal to us. She did it so beautifully. Mary allowed God to take possession of her life by her purity, her humility, and her faithful love. Let us seek to grow under the guidance of our Heavenly Mother in these three important interior attitudes of the soul that delight the heart of God and enable him to unite himself to us. These important interior attitudes of purity, humility, and faithful love. And we'll do one more. The thirst of Jesus on the cross is not imagination. It was his word. I thirst. Let us hear him saying it to me and saying it to you. It is really a gift of God. If you listen with your heart, you will hear, you will understand, until you know deep inside that Jesus thirsts for you. You can't begin to know who he wants to be for you or who he wants you to be for him. If you listen with your heart, you will hear, you will understand, until you know deep inside that Jesus thirsts for you. You can't begin to know who he wants to be for you or who he wants you to be for him. So we'll continue these reflections tomorrow. The thirst of Jesus for us, and just that renewal of our thirst for God in response. Lord Jesus, we thank you for the precious gift of the words of Mother Teresa, for the even more precious gift of her example of prayer and service to you in the poorest of the poor. We ask that this day you help us see you in however you are disguised. We ask that you help us reach out to you in those we meet. We ask you to increase our thirst for you and to know more deeply how you thirst for love of us. Jesus, we offer you this day all we do and think and say. Amen.